Breaking NASCAR news coming from the R&D Center. Bob Pockrass reports that Alex Bowman and William Byron, as well as the 48 and 24 teams, were docked 60 points with their interim crew chief suspended for 2 races, affected next week because of how late the penalty was on the notice for this week, and were fined $75,000. Their cars were taken to the R&D Center after Richmond, and it was a greenhouse violation. So once again, Hendrick Motorsports is under the knife for a huge penalty. I would say this also, there will be 5 playoff points that will be taken away from each team as well, and this is big. It's continuing a seemingly big thread through the season that Hendrick Motorsports and NASCAR are going back and forth with each other. I must say, the timing of this is really convenient, seeing how Hendrick Motorsports had their appeal basically won because they got their 100 points back, and now with the 48 and 24 losing 60 points, while it won't affect William Byron when it comes to playoff seeding, it will affect Alex Bowman. Coming into the Dirt Bristol weekend, Bowman was 105 points above the cut line already. Now with this penalty, he's 45 above, being leapfrogged by guys like Chastain, Christopher Bell, and Kevin Harvick. And while that might not seem like such a big deal, if the penalties stick, which is a big if knowing the appeals panel, it will mean that Bowman could lose out on crucial playoff points come the start of the playoffs. And speaking of playoff points, both of these teams are losing 5 of those already on top of whatever Bowman loses here and whatever William Byron loses from regular season seeding. So this penalty will be big when it comes to the end of the season as well, but again, if it sticks. And Hendrick said as much, that we're reviewing the penalties issued today by NASCAR and will determine the next steps following Sunday's race. So at this point, Hendrick Motorsports is probably right under the microscope of NASCAR. There's no way that NASCAR, after basically being taken off the leash against Hendrick Motorsports and then smacked back down by the appeals panel, there's no way they're not going to be watching them like a hawk, which is something that's honestly normal for Hendrick Motorsports if you remember the past. I remember back in 2012, for instance, Hendrick Motorsports was knocking it out of the park. All 4 of their cars were fast every week. They were winning a bunch of races, and then NASCAR had to change the rules because Hendrick Motorsports had such a big advantage. So this is pretty normal, but I think the fact that it's so close together, that it's only a couple weeks, maybe a month apart from the initial penalties and then in the appeal in that time and all the frenzy with that, I think this sends a clear message to the garage. If you screw around in any way with this car, even if you get away with it, we're gonna watch you, you're gonna pay, we're gonna get ours. I think that's what NASCAR's putting out there right now. It is important to note about these penalties that they are L1 level penalties, which means that it will not affect the playoff eligibility of the 24 or 48 teams in any way. Now, another penalty further down the road, especially again, we have to continue to preface, if this penalty sticks, another penalty down the road would be even bigger, and with the precedent set already for the fact that they got away with one in NASCAR's eyes, you would have to imagine that these 2 teams in particular would have the hammer dropped on them more than probably any other team has had ever. NASCAR did state on their website that the section referenced in the NASCAR rulebook was 14.1.d, overall assembled vehicle rules, and 14.12b, engineering changelog. A NASCAR spokesman confirmed that the penalty was a modification to the greenhouse area on each car, which is the A, B, and C posts. Before the penalties, it said that Bowman was atop the Cup standings while Byron was 4th, 35 points behind, but at this rate, the points are going to change a ton. We stated the playoff standings. The actual full point standings difference is that Alex Bowman will go from 263 points to 203, meaning 7th from 1st, and William Byron will go from 228 points to 168, which means he goes from 4th in the points to 14th in the point standings. Again, it might not seem like a lot, but this is huge when it comes to the playoffs in the big picture of things. And it also, I think, is really big in sending a message to everybody that NASCAR is wanting to take control back. This is something I've had a bit of a problem with the last couple of weeks, months, maybe even the last year and a half or so. NASCAR has not had enough power in its own running of the sport. When it hands out penalties, it seems like the appeals panel takes them away, and it just seems very redundant and confusing to a fan of why it even matters for these penalties. I think, especially with the fact that they've went out of their way to quote-unquote randomly select the 24 and the 48, that this is going to be a penalty that sticks. I would be very, very surprised if this one gets taken away by the appeals panel, as I think that NASCAR needs this penalty, needs to show that they are the police of the garage and that the Outlaws cannot run the police department on this one. Because this isn't the first time when it comes to Hendrick getting their points back before that somebody has. You look, for instance, a little bit with Colleague, though some would definitely say favoritism or would say it's not fair to them that they didn't get all the points back and Hendrick did for the same penalty with the louvers. But you look at Jeremy Clements last year, you look at William Byron last year at Texas. There are multiple instances of drivers or teams getting penalties rescinded when NASCAR is trying to lay the hammer down. And this is one penalty that was genuinely needed. I talked about it earlier this week. I've talked about it for a couple weeks now. NASCAR needs to get its teeth back when it comes to policing the garage. When I say this was needed, I think that this is one of the most needed penalties in years for NASCAR. Just because with everything that's went wrong so far this year, from the TV ratings being down, from the penalties being taken away, from maybe some of the controversies with the racing and procedural instances like green-white checkers, say, or others, that for me would mean that this was needed simply because NASCAR needs some kind of momentum shift, some way to get away from how bad this so-called monumental 75th season has been for them. When it comes to how Hendrick Motorsports should look at this, well, like I said before, I think they should take it serious, but I don't know that it's necessarily as heavy of a penalty as many might see it as and what they might think. Yes, the interim crew chiefs will be suspended, but unless I've read the penalty wrong, and maybe I have, Blake Harris and Rudy Fugle should be back after this week and going into Martinsville anyway. So at least two of these teams, while maybe not having somebody important to them, have their most important piece of the pit box back up there for Martinsville and moving forward. I think that when it comes to the appeals process, Hendrick probably will file an appeal. I just don't think that this one is going to be a win. I think that NASCAR at this point is dead set on getting them, and it's probably a losing battle to try and fight NASCAR at their own game, because NASCAR is probably just going to randomly select them again. I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised either if they probably change different wording in the rule book just to entrap the Hendrick Motorsport teams they got even more now. Now, I will say this also means that the points leader now is Ross Chastain, which will be really interesting to see how that kind of affects the way that things are run and the playoff standings. But the fallout for this, I think, isn't going to be necessarily as massive as many fans want it to be. Many fans, I think, are out for blood for Hendrick Motorsports and think that they should have the book and then some thrown at them. I don't think that it's going to go that far, so I don't think fans are going to be too happy in that regard. They're probably going to ask for it to go further, but I do think some fans will be happy that NASCAR finally got it under control and got at least two of the teams that seem to slip past them. But with that, I want to pass this all on to you. What do you think of the recent news of Hendrick Motorsports being penalized again? Do you think it's justified? Do you not? Do you think they're going to win the appeal? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like in this video, share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you to all my channel members for your continued support, and be sure to watch all the post-race streams that I'll be doing this Bristol Dirt weekend. So, until next time, have a good one.